seems really simple. Getting together a group of middle schoolers, it helps all these guys start to interact with one another and have true friendships with people who are very different from them. And that's, in the United States, that's our biggest issue, is race. And that's how we're gonna solve that problem, is by being friends, by having loving relationships with one another. You can't go to school for that. You can't write up an equation. That comes from experience. It comes from that spiritual friendship, heart to heart, across lines of difference that helps unite the world. Crisis leads to victory. That setbacks bring about progress. History and the future of the world is not a straight path towards unity. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be, tripping and falling. Like a child doesn't learn to walk by doing it perfectly the first time. The way we learn is by suffering, is by making mistakes. If we continue to deny the fact that we're one people, it's going to mean we're going to suffer a lot more than we have to. But even as a Baha'i, knowing that humanity is one, that's one thing. Learning how to do it is a whole nother. All these challenging things that happen in the world, they're just opportunities for us to awaken the consciousness of our fellow humanity, to realize that we're all one people. Hi, my name is Mike Mastry, and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina, and I work as a general manager for 2 landscaping companies. One does organic fertilizer treatments for lawns, and the other helps out with trees and shrubs. I think, my big hobby is really working with middle school youth in the Junior Youth Spiritual Empowerment Program. I also love to play a Brazilian martial art called capoeira. So I was born in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is a beach area on the west coast of Florida near Tampa Bay. And I was born in 1986. I was the only kid, yeah. So I think because of the challenges of my family, like my parents kind of stopped having kids after me. Grew up in, I guess, kind of a middle-class family. My dad owned a bait and tackle, local, small business. My mother stayed at home. As I grew up, I found out that my mom had a mental illness. And so that caused a lot of challenges. Almost every year, like my mom would go into the hospital for her illness. And so I'd lose my mom, for part of the year. But in some ways it was great because I got to spend a lot of time with my dad, who worked a lot. So pretty much my mom's mental illness started right when I was born. She had postpartum depression and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. But my parents got me into the performing arts. So they had me in magnet schools, they're called, where basically students from all over the county are attracted to go to these schools because they have arts programs. And so I was in the theater program in elementary, middle, and high school. And that really was the place where I found a way to kind of escape the turmoil that was happening in my home when my mom's episodes would manifest. Like late primary school, my mom got me involved in a choir called the Florida Boy Choir. And so we would sing in different places. And one year we got to go to Europe. And so we toured Europe, and we were one of the first choirs from America that toured Europe after the Berlin Wall fell in some places. So we were in Warsaw, Leipzig, Germany, Prague, Czech Republic. Yeah, that was really an exciting experience to see, another part of the world. I did really good in school. I was kind of in this country, being white and male, like, you know, it gives you a leg up in a lot of ways, I think. And so like teachers, you know, treat you in a certain way. And so I remember I was always like competing with the other gal for the highest GPA or something. My dad's really cool. He basically like every weekend goes hunting and fishing. He's like, you know, kind of a typical American man. Like he's got his own small business. He's got a, you know, Chevy truck. He took me on a trip to Canada once where we went fishing for salmon. Yeah, and really, I think he and my step-granddad really instilled in me a love for nature. So I went to university in Winter Park, Florida, Rollins College, and while I was there, I studied acting and also environmental studies. When I was a young kid, my mom, she was on a sailboat, and she got knocked off of it. Like the boom of the sail swung around and knocked her off the boat, and she came underneath the boat, and there's a thing called a keel, which is the part of the boat that sticks down into the water that balances the sails. And she hit the keel as she went under the boat. And so as a result, she went to a chiropractor. And when she went to this chiropractor, she was sitting in the office. This chiropractor happened to be a Baha'i. And his dad and mother were in the waiting room, who were also Baha'is, longtime Baha'is. And they told my mom about the Baha'i faith. I ended up going to play soccer with this guy's son. And he was the first Baha'i I knew, and probably one of my first African-American friends. And I remember having him over to our house to sleep over, and because my dad's a big hunter, there's lots of heads on the wall. We've got like a huge buffalo on the wall, and then in my room there was a deer on the wall, and he was sleeping in the top bunk, and he had to go home early because he was scared because this deer was like staring right in his face all night long. And then when I was about 10, my mom enrolled in the Baha'i faith. She became a Baha'i. And it was during one of her episodes. And so my dad and I, we thought, this is some kind of weird cult that mom's gotten into. What's she doing? I don't know. You know, something she's doing with her episode, right? And around that same time, I was in a play that was about an important trial that happened here in the United States where evolution was put on trial. In the United States, there was a ban on teaching evolution in schools because it went against the Bible. And so there were a lot of discussions backstage about religion. And I remember one story in particular that really started me on my path of questioning Christianity and religion and you know, spirituality and things was they talked about in World War I, during Christmas, the Germans and the French, when they were fighting, they stopped fighting with each other, actually went across enemy lines and celebrated Christmas together. And then the next day, went back to killing each other. And I said, this is stupid. And so I just started questioning and saw the hypocrisy in religion and how, you know, people say one thing, but they do something totally different, and they use it for all these awful reasons. And so I just got really involved with, like, I don't know, being a middle schooler, obsessed with girls, and really focused on just learning more about science. I remember being really excited about quantum physics and Stephen Hawking. When I was about 16 years old, I'd kind of given my heart to this girl, and she did not return that same affection. And so I was really heartbroken. And so that summer, I was just heartbroken. And I ran into an old friend of mine who was a Baha'i. She went to the same school as us, and so she would many times kind of drive with us to school. My mom would pick her up and take her to school with us, and so we'd have conversations in the car. But when I was 16, I ran into this friend of mine at an art show, and she was with another young Baha'i who had been in that middle school class, And I was like, I might go check out this Baha'i thing, you know? And so I started going to study circles. And I remember distinctly this old man, he was sitting there and he says, this quote from Baha'u'llah, he says, "Regard man as a mine rich in gems of inestimable value. Education can alone cause it to reveal its treasures and enable mankind to benefit therefrom." And I remember when he was saying this in the study circle, it was like the first study circle I visited. His whole face was light. It was illumined. And I'm like, whoa. And I just kept getting attracted. I started getting books from the bookstore and reading. I think I was reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and then I got Abdul Baha's Some Answered Questions. And I was reading Sun Tzu because I was like, maybe someday I'll conquer the world like Napoleon, because I'm a short guy. And but then Sun Tzu kind of gradually like went to the side of my bed, and Some Answered Questions was what I would read. And I'd heard something that, you know, Baha'is read every morning and evening, the writings of their faith. So I was reading a Some Answered Question every morning and evening, just kind of picking and choosing. And I was just like, wow, this man is so wise. I always wanted to be a wise man. And Abdul Baha was like the wisest man in the world. Like everything he said was just made sense. And all his explanations about Christianity, you know, made sense to me in a way that so many of the Christian theology and Christians in my community just didn't make sense to me. And so I got more interested. I ended up reading Mary Perkins' Hour of the Dawn and learning the story of the Bab and Mullah Hussein and the followers of the Bab in the early 19th century in Iran. And just, I love fantasy novels. And reading about them, it was like it was real. Like the fantasy novel, like, you know, these like Knights of the Round Table and stuff, like it actually happened. And they were the 19 letters of the living. The local spiritual assembly in my community, they appointed me to the Holy Day Committee that summer. And so I was reading this book and planning the martyrdom of the Bab commemoration and some other holy days, not knowing that like they thought I was just a young Baha'i youth, but I didn't think I was a Baha'i. So I'm investigating this. I'm reading Paul Lampel's compilation, Proofs of Baha'u'llah's Mission. I'm taking book 4. I go to Baha'i summer school, and I'm just really like getting into this. I'm going to youth nights. I think at one point the youth night coordinator, she says, "Can you actually prepare a talk on something you're reading in Some Answered Questions?" And I'm like, okay, cool, yeah, I'll do that. But I'm not like really committed to this yet, because I still don't believe in God, and I'm still not sure about this, because to me, I'm like, Baha'u'llah, yeah, he's true, but look what's happened to every other religion. You know, when Muhammad died, his faith went split. I remember loving Muhammad when I was going through world history class. I mean, at that time it was like 2003, so 9/11 had happened, and you know, so that faith got blood on its hands. Christianity already is like, you know, diminished in my eyes. So I'm like, well, these Baha'is, yeah, Baha'u'llah, sure, he's got truth, but are these Baha'is, are they following Baha'u'llah's teachings? That's what I wanted to know. And so I remember being at this summer school, and I remember these 2 Persian men, one of whom, his name was Shokrullah Ashji. He had sat on the lap of Abdul Baha when he was a child. He was actually named by Abdul Baha, I later found out, because his parents couldn't have children, and received this child, and they asked Abdul Baha, what should we name him? And he said, Shokrullah, praise be to God. And he was luminous. He had this beautiful white hair, blue eyes, and he was just always well-groomed. He was just a gorgeous man. If a man can be gorgeous, Shokrullah was gorgeous. He was handsome. And this other man named Alan, who was also Persian, sitting with me. It's just us. Everyone's left. We're just hanging out in the cafeteria, just talking. And they're like, Michael, why are you not a Baha'i? You You know so much. You know more than some of the Baha'is. I said, well, I just want to, but I want to make sure that, I want to make sure the Baha'is are actually doing what Baha'u'llah said. And I was ready for them to be like, well, this, and this, and this, and try to convince me, right? But instead, these guys, they said, wow, very interesting. Please let me know what you find out. Let me know what you find out. They wanted me to teach them, Like, I was like, what the heck is this, And so I went back to my room that day, and I was just meditating on this conversation, and I'm thinking like, if everything that Baha'u'llah says is true, and Baha'u'llah says there is a God, maybe there is a God. Because the God that Baha'u'llah talks about, is unknowable in his essence. I can get on with that, because the God I don't believe in is the one that everyone says they believe in, because it doesn't make sense. A white guy in the sky, or I don't know, all these, but I love this idea that like God is unknowable in his essence, that human beings can't describe the ultimate reality. Like everything we say about God always falls short. And Baha'u'llah says, my pen groans in its inadequacy to describe that divine reality. I love that. So I said, maybe there is a God. And I felt something grabbed my heart and kind of like, boom, boom. And that's when I believed. That was my moment where I became a believer. I believed, but I wasn't ready to sign a card, because I'm like, why do I need to sign a card? I believe, I don't need to, I'm not into this whole, fund and institute. I was really against organized religion. And so finally, like I go through a lot of different meditation, reading, I'm studying, a few months go by, and then finally I'm like, well, okay, if I'm gonna be a Baha'i, I also have to accept the administration and the laws and the institutions, and because Baha'u'llah didn't just talk about spiritualizing ourselves like in the time of Christ. Like, this is not just about renewing brotherly love, it's about establishing a new civilization, a new arrangement in society where the institutions, the individual, the community are all working together. So if I'm gonna be a Baha'i, I also have to accept this thing, because Baha'u'llah taught that too. And maybe it's not perfect, but that's not the idea. The idea is that the blueprint that God gave us through Baha'u'llah is perfect. So I said, okay, I'll sign a card. And so I tell this member of the LSA, Happy Dobbs, I'm like, I'll sign a card. Before acting for me was like an ego trip. I would get on stage, and afterwards people would come up and be like, Michael, you're amazing. Wow. Wow. And all that. Every time I would get done with a play, I'd get sick. Not like physically, but spiritually, I was sick because I had such a big head about myself. I thought I was the best actor in the world. And so then when I became a Baha'i, I learned this thing, that work done in the spirit of service is worship to God. And it's selfless service to humanity. It's not about me, it's about serving others. And so that became my mantra. And so gradually I was able to really, learn more about that. And I still struggle with it, but it wasn't as challenging, because I had I had prayer, and I had these writings and this community that helped me remember that selfless service was what I was really longing for. So what's happened in the past is in the past. But if your heart is pure and searching for the truth, it'll come to you like wind in the breeze.